Thank you everyone for being here. Today's webinar is Proven Strategies for Building Confident Readers and Writers. This is a joint webinar with Writable and HMH. We have two amazing hosts today that are going to be sharing their journey of using Writable and building writing stamina with the Warren County Public Schools. Both of these ladies are National Board Certified teachers, and both of them are working at Plano Elementary School right now. They, Miss Beals, Katherine, teaches 5th grade, and then Miss Meador, she is the instructional coach for the building, and you're going to hear from both of them. I think the most important part to think about too is how they are able to work together. That instructional coach model in the classroom really makes a difference. And so our agenda today over the next minutes that we're together is we're going to talk a minute about focusing on writing. We're going to talk about the writing journey for Warren County, and then of course for Miss Beals in her 5th grade classroom. The writing scrimmage, which is a big piece of how she was able to prepare her students for the state assessment. And then she's in year 3 of this writing scrimmage. So we're going to talk about her goals for the next year and questions and resources. So we've put a pretty comprehensive document together. Katie did put that into the chat for you. So I want to make sure that you all have that information. The bit.ly is scrimmage 23. It also has a QR code, and hopeful that you find as much value in this as I have found in working with these amazing ladies. So let's take a look at Warren County. So I'm going to go ahead and let Alicia talk to us about Warren County, and then we're going to jump in and talk more about their elementary school and then their goals for this year.
Thank you, Carol. Welcome. We're very excited that you're here today. We are in the Warren County Public School District located in Bowling Green, Kentucky. Bowling Green is home to the National Corvette Museum, as well as Western Kentucky University. You may have heard of some of those things before to kind of give you an idea of where we're located. Warren County Public Schools has a population of 18,000 plus students. We have 15 elementary schools, 4 middle schools, 4 high schools, 7 alternative schools. We have the first international high school in the state of Kentucky. There are over 120 spoken languages within our district. Okay, and our free and reduced population is 65.35%.
Yeah,
now, as we dive into Plano, which is mine and Miss Beals' home school, we have between 660 to 700 students. We are a preschool through 6th grade building. It is interesting to note that last year alone, we tripled in our English as a second language learner population. We are now a 1-to-1 Chromebook school. We have a free and reduced population of 55.74%, and we are a Leader in Me Lighthouse School, and we are working towards achieving legacy status this year. Okay, some of our school academic goals that are reflected in our CSIP are that we wanted 72.9% of our students to reach proficiency in reading on this past school year's state assessment. For math, we wanted 70.5% to reach proficiency. And our goal for writing was to have a combined proficiency score of 62%. And then we create grade level and class level classroom goals that align to our CSIP goals, and we track those within our building to make sure we're inching towards these school-wide goals.
So thank you for all that. So I wanted everyone to be sure to know all about Warren County Public Schools, and then we're going to spend just a second to talk about why we're going to focus on writing. So first of all, we know that writing matters. Writing has a direct impact to a student's academic success, not only their academic success, but the professional growth, and then their personal expression as they go throughout their life. Only 27% of students are proficient in writing in grades 3rd through 8th. And yet we know that 90% of workers must write while working, and 5% of our multilingual learners write at a proficient level. So we've got some work to do. We also have some really wonderful research on growing writers. We know that writing practice that is connected to instruction allows the teacher to give quality feedback, which then allows the students to have better revision and drive writing growth. We have a white paper that is linked both in the research, in the resources, and on this slide. And so I think it's really important that we listen to what is happening with Warren County Public Schools and Plano Elementary, because they really are doing the writing that connects to the practice and then providing the feedback. And that's what we're going to spend all our time talking about, all this loop with the great writers. So I want to turn this over to Katherine Beals, and she's going to talk a little bit about how this all started and some changes that she made before she even had used Writable. So go ahead, Ms. Beals.
Hello, thank you all for having me. So I'm going to give you, I'm a 5th grade teacher. I've been teaching for about 9 years, and this is my 3rd year in 5th. So I'm going to take you on a little trip, a little journey. So if you'll just sit back, relax, you can imagine I was a 3rd grade teacher for about 5 or 6 years, minding my own business. And if you've been in a school any length of time, you know that there's promotions, there's horizontal changes. And we just had a year where there was huge shifts in our building. And I was the pleasure of being moved to a wide open 5th grade team. So it felt like overnight I had become a 5th grade writing teacher. And while I had taught writing in 3rd grade, we all know it's a different beast in 5th grade because of the requirements at that end of year state assessment, right? So as I was preparing for the upcoming year, my first year being a 5th grade writing teacher, I was looking through some of the curriculum, but specifically some of the student data. And I noticed a big red flag. So these students that had been in 5th grade the previous year were 60, 70% or so proficient distinguished in reading. Same in math, about 60, 70% proficient and distinguished in math. But then I looked at their end of year writing scores, and only about 22% of students were proficient or distinguished in writing. And for me, that was definitely sounding the alarms, because I do think that these students are likely capable of what we're seeing in reading and math. So what's happening in writing where they're not performing at proficiency at the same rate? So I started digging, and it didn't take me too long to step, maybe a couple months into my writing career, to realize that one of the big problems was a feedback problem. It was a tier 1 feedback problem. I realized that I too was perpetuating the problem, but that it was something that was in our building. And so what I noticed is students were giving me their papers. I was trying to provide feedback. And of course, you can imagine with 90 students, that's difficult to do. I would say, oh, okay, your intro does not set a clear purpose, or it only partially gathers the interest of the reader. And so I was speaking to students in these vague forms of feedback. And they were frustrated. They had no idea what I wanted them to do. I didn't communicate with them clearly. They would respond to me with, is this good? Or like, is this long enough? I know that drives us all crazy, but they had no words for the quality of their piece. And I couldn't figure out how to give them those words. So I realized right off the bat, we had a big feedback problem. My feedback was vague. It was not concrete enough, and students weren't able to do anything with it. And if they can't understand my feedback, they can't revise, we're not going to see growth. And so I'm going to talk about a little bit, just in brief, of some of the changes I made, and then we'll jump back to that feedback piece. So I decided I'm just going to, we're going to start from scratch, and I'm going to figure out a way to provide feedback that is so concrete that students are going to be able to apply it, so black and white that I'm not frustrated and they're not frustrated. And so I threw out all my just generalized rubrics, and I made these checklists. And in the checklist, I put every single thing I wanted in the intro. I wanted a hook, I wanted a bridge, I wanted a thesis, I wanted capitals. I even put I wanted it indented, everything. Did the same thing for all the body paragraphs and the conclusion. And I taught with that checklist. I had students write with that checklist. I had students peer review with that checklist. I graded on that checklist. And I'm telling you, it felt like almost overnight, we were actually getting somewhere. The feedback was making a difference. And so we did that the entire first year, and it really impacted student achievement. In fact, I truly believe that one change and the way I gave feedback that was applicable for students, they could use it, was the reason why our school went from 22% proficient distinguished in the first year to 66%, right? Over one entire year. And so I truly believe that change in feedback was one of the reasons why. And Ms. Meador, do you want to speak to some of the research that the impact that feedback has on student achievement?
Absolutely. So many of us are familiar with John Hattie and his research on that meta-analysis piece on the effect size of different components of instruction and how that produces a trajectory of what student growth and student achievement will look like. And feedback, for example, is a 0.70 effect size. And anything greater than a 0.4 is going to accelerate student learning, and we're going to see a noticeable change in growth for academics. In conjunction with that feedback piece, she also had that evaluative, reflective piece, teacher clarity piece on her part when she reflected and saw that feedback was what was one of the big things that was lacking in quality writing instruction. And teacher clarity and that effective evaluative and reflection piece is a 0.75 effect size. So those three things in conjunction already put her students on a clearer pathway just by making some modifications to how she delivered instruction. And really at that time, not the only, but one of the major modifications was just how she was providing students with feedback so that they could actually internalize it and then use it in a way that made their writing better. She's going to talk later about her direct instruction piece, which also has a strong effect size of 0.6. And then that teacher efficacy piece has a 1.57 effect size. And so all of those things together shows through research was putting Ms. Beals and her students on the right path to demonstrate growth for writing, when it all started with that one piece of feedback and how that is so critical in helping students to reflect on their writing, make adjustments, and actually understand what needs to happen in order to make their writing better.
Thank you, Ms. Meador. And just to add on to your comments, not only does my research shows that, because that was the major change that I made that year. And we went from 22% proficient distinguished to I believe it was 66% in 1 year. So I have my own data to support it as well. And so I'm going to show you what some of those checklists look like and how it changed my life. I don't know if we can maybe toggle down to one of my checklists for them to see. You can see it right here. I mean, there is nothing, glamorous or glitzy about this. Like all good teachers, I was sitting at my kitchen table trying to come up with a solution, right? So I created this checklist and it worked. And like I had said before, I taught with it. We went through, as I was writing with students, I would show them, oh, I have my hook, I'm checking it off. Look, I've indented. Oh no, I forgot to write a bridge. I literally modeled step by step. Then I gave them the same checklist when they were writing their own piece, and I made them write and check. Self-reviewing, I made them reflect on their piece. I made them check. Peer reviewing, every single time we did any work with the piece, this checklist came out. And we did this for our opinion pieces and for our informational pieces. And it was fantastic. And we saw so much growth. And as a classroom teacher, I saw such a change in how frustrated my students would get, because they wanted to do well, they wanted a higher grade, they wanted to revise, but they finally were understanding how to do that. So I had to move to this concrete way. However, with all good plans, there's always a catch-22. And so in year one, I realized that I created this insane paperwork problem. Okay, and we are not going to tell my principal, although you could look how many copies I made that year. We're not going to talk about it. But I had a checklist for when they were writing, a checklist for when they were peer reviewing, probably 2 or 3, because we peer reviewed with more than one partner, a checklist when they were self-reviewing, a checklist for me when I was grading. So we're talking 5, 6 checklists times 90 students times 6 pieces throughout we're talking hundreds of paper. And so I created this mountain of paperwork. And while I was tickled because it was working, it was a logistical nightmare. So I created a solution and a problem all at the same time. And another issue that I didn't foresee happening was there was really no way for me to track efficiently progress over time. I could, unless I was going to dig through 1,000 pieces of paperwork. If you asked me, how did a student do in December versus February, that's a lot of paper for me to dig through. I also really couldn't easily see if students were applying feedback. I knew they were because their writing was improving, but the way I was looking at it was way more qualitative, and I really need those quantitative numbers to see, okay, we are applying feedback over months and months of writing. So the paperwork problem, the tracking feedback, right, and tracking their progress over time, those were some big issues that I created. So that was the end of year one, and you can see here, I was hand grading it. This is how I would grade each piece. Took me about 10 minutes times 90 times all of our pieces. So while I was onto something good, it was a struggle. So let's jump to year two. Year two, I went to Alicia and I said, Alicia, what I'm doing is working and I will not abandon ship, but I need efficiency. I need to continue this in an effective way that solves all those logistical problems that I've created for myself. And so she begged me to try Writable. I was skeptical at first because I said, if I can't create my exact checklist because I know it works, then I don't want to do it. And she said, you can. So we got on there together and she helped me. She showed me how to build a rubric. And once she showed me a couple, it was pretty user-friendly. I was able to do it. I pulled some of their rubric items and I edited it exactly how I wanted it. And before you knew it, I created a writable rubric. You can see it here on the screen on that right-hand side with the stars. I created one that mimicked my checklist digitally. It wasn't paper pencil, it was digital. And so I was a happy camper, because it was exactly, I didn't want to lose all the progress by just trying something totally new. So I created this rubric exactly like my checklist. I created my first assignment and attached it. And we literally did year one all over again, but this time digitally. So students would write their piece on Writable, and there was the checklist nearby. Self-review. Here was how they self-reviewed in year one. They would go through their checklist, but let's see how they self-reviewed in year two. The Writable checklist is exactly the same items that I had in year one, but this time it was so much more organized. Not only was it logistically more organized, the quality of their self-review improved too, because in year one, you'll notice that all students did was mark the pieces they were missing. But in year two, you see that they're marking themselves more on a scale. It's still the same check items, but they can give them, and then they're writing themselves comments. My students this year have been highlighting for themselves and writing themselves reminders. So not only is it more organized, the quality is better. The end of year one, I tried to use Google Docs. I was like, well, maybe in year one, because their state assessments online, I could try the computer. And you can see I was trying to peer review on Google Docs. They were trying to write comments. I'd have to open 90 documents individually. Monitoring those comments was very difficult. It just didn't work. But in year two with Writable, when they were peer reviewing, I would just hit the setting that says I would like students to peer review, and Writable would send anonymously other pieces in the class. And again, students would use that same digital checklist that I had used to teach with, they had used to write with, they had used this. So I'm doing year one. So I was happy because I was skeptical at first, but I'm like, this is exactly what I did in year one. But not only is the paperwork mountain gone and dealt with, everything is saved. So all I have to do is click a student name to see their peer review, their self-review, their revisions. It's all, there's no paperwork for me to thumb through. So that progress over time is so much more manageable. It's just to click on their name and it's there. And you can see the quality too. If you look at year 2, this is a peer review. They're highlighting, adding comments over those highlights when you hover. They're leaving comments. They're grading on that checklist, more of a scale, but it's still those checklist items that they're used to. So it's not just logistically, it wasn't just better. It was better. It was more effective too. The quality was better. So year 2 was such a shift. I'll never go back because now I'm able to be just as specific in feedback, but all of those logistical issues that I created for myself, all that inability to track is now fixed. So that kind of brings us to the end of year 2 as my journey for a writing teacher.
Ms. Beals, before we continue on, I think it's important to note that in that peer review section, there are sentence prompts that are provided to students. So if students don't know how to generate their own feedback, maybe they have the idea in their head, but it's really hard for them to get it out in writing, because we know sometimes students struggle from getting it to here to paper pencil. There are sentence starters already embedded in that they can choose to use as a starter for how they want to give feedback to students when they are peer reviewing.
Yes, and for some of my first pieces, when I'm creating the writable assignment, I can generate some of those comments too, and some of those sentence stems. For example, I know text evidence, we struggle with accurately quoting. And so one of the sentence stems that I always add in there is, remember, when you use the text exactly, you need to use, and so my students say, you need to use quotation marks. And I can back off as the year goes on, but you're exactly right, Ms. Meador, being able to feed in those comment stems helps my students give specific feedback. And like I said, I back off as the year goes on, but in this first piece, man, I'm getting them right to that point, because if they can't communicate feedback, they certainly can't accept and apply feedback, right? So thank you for bringing that up.
All right, I jumped ahead to the writing scrimmage because I really feel like the writing scrimmage is an important part of the success for your state writing. And so we're going to do exactly the same piece. We're going to talk about what the writing scrimmage is, and we're going to talk about when you did it without Writable, and then when you included Writable as part of your writing scrimmage. So let's let you jump in and talk about the writing scrimmage now.
Okay, so another secret weapon that I really think prepares our students for end of the year state testing is the writing scrimmage. So if you think about if you teach in a tested grade level, you know that we always do reading practice tests or reading scrimmages, where we use the timer and we have students on a platform that's similar to testing. So they learn the buttons, and we do the same thing for math. We do math practice tests to prepare them. So why are we not doing it for writing? So I wanted, just like we do reading and math practice test or practice scrimmages, we need to do a writing one. The purpose behind it is, by the time that I plan this writing scrimmage, it's usually March, I know my students can write. I know they're able to write a 5-paragraph essay. I know they can write intros and body paragraphs with evidence and a conclusion. But the end of the year state test is so much more than that. You have to write it in all one sitting. Usually, and I know in Kentucky, it's usually 90 minutes. You have to read text on your own that you have not seen before, a fresh prompt that you have not seen before. You have to do it on the computer with maybe some buttons or some functions that you've never used. You have to be able to toggle between different readings, and just the stamina. My writing class is 25 minutes. I've never had students write for 90 minutes at one time. So all of this is going to impede my students' ability to do what I already know they can do, which is write a 5-paragraph essay that they need to. And so the point of the writing scrimmage, and it's usually best to do it sometime in March or so, give yourself some time to digest after the scrimmage, is to help my students prove to themselves that they are going to be fine on the end of the year test, that they have already done it. We've done this scrimmage. You've already done the 90-minute timer. You've already done a text you haven't seen before. You've already done a prompt. So to prove to them they can already do it. And so I'll just go in a little bit on a little, chase a little rabbit hole for a minute there. But one thing that my students always say before their writing scrimmage is that they're so nervous. They're so nervous. In March, oh my gosh, you're going to have to make me write for 90 minutes. I can't do it. What's the prompt? I don't even know. Right? Let's get it all out of the way. I tell them, guys, if you bomb it, guess what? Nothing happens. It just gives me information to help you. And so after the writing scrimmage, when that real end of the year state testing comes around, I'm like, guys, you rocked it. You've got it. And their confidence is so much higher. So that's kind of my purpose behind the writing scrimmage. So to kind of get prepared, it's if you wait till spring, I do feel like it's a little bit difficult to get it off the ground. So I would start maybe October, start the planning piece. I know that we do have kind of a schedule for what I suggest, but I would say in October, it's probably best to go ahead and pick a date and get it on the calendar sometime in March, maybe April. Go ahead and decide where you're going to have the scrimmage, in the library altogether or in classrooms, right? And go ahead and get that part done. That's a great thing to do in October. And I would say make sure that you're starting to try Writable. You know, the writing scrimmage on Writable is fantastic. So go ahead and start trying to use Writable at this time. November, you're going to need some help. So I would start contacting some volunteers. You're going to need some proctors to help walk around and just monitor. And you're going to need some scores to help you score students after they're finished their piece at their writing scrimmage. December, if you have any special populations, like Ms. Meador said, our English language learner population's grown. So I need to get, I'm going to reach out to the ESL teacher, to our special education resource teachers, kind of get them on board to start preparing. So all of this is stuff that is not too time consuming, that you can kind of do now to get your feet under you, and it doesn't take very long. And then in January, just prep your scores. I give my scores a little packet, just a little overview, and I don't mind to share that with you all, a little overview of what the writing scrimmage is and what I would like them to do. I do think it's funny, if you look at the picture, this picture was chosen in year 1. I bet you know why. I need to update it because year 2, I'm not paper pencil anymore. But anyway, I just think that's hysterical to show the boat that I was in year 1. So I give them a packet. I like to make sure that my readers have the text that students are going to read, and that my scorers know the prompts and the text and the rubric. So they're just familiar. So this is all information I'll give them in January. And then besides that, once we get to February, and we just need to create the writing scrimmage assignment. We just need to make sure we have a fresh prompt, we have a fresh text, we have it set up and Writable, ready to go. And then the week of, we touch base with our proctors and our scorers. And so this resource is available to you, but if you just start now, I just do maybe 1 or 2 things a month. It takes me about 10 minutes or so I'm set up. So that is kind of how, if you're interested in doing a writing scrimmage, how I would pace that out. So let me give you a little narrative, so to speak, of what the writing scrimmage has looked like for me, and how I've adjusted. So I'm going to take you back to year 1. We all know I have a paperwork problem. Well, the writing scrimmage is no exception to that. So for the writing scrimmage in year 1, I had packets for students, and the packets had their fresh prompt. It had their text that they were going to read. And then I did have them use Google Docs to try to type their piece at their writing scrimmage, because I thought, state testing is on the computer. I'm going to try to do as much on the computer as I can. And so we set up the timer. We had students all together. We were all level 0, just like state testing, because I wanted them to feel whatever feelings they need to feel, so that when they did the end of the year assessment, they were confident. So we did our writing scrimmage. Students wrote. When students finished their piece, they would pick up their piece. They would head on back to my scorers. My scorers would take their piece, and for about 5 or 6 minutes, my scorers would talk with the students, read their piece, give feedback, and determine if the student met proficiency on that scrimmage in the moment. That immediate feedback was so powerful. The good news was we were having immediate feedback. Students were able to, if they met proficiency, they were able to be finished. If they didn't meet proficiency, they were going to sit back down and work on the revisions that the scorer had provided for them. But unfortunately, another logistical problem that I didn't expect is still important, still impactful, but again, if you look at that picture, I thought of when I was imagining back to year one, I thought of like when you were at an amusement park and the lines are insane and the crowds are insane. Well, we had this huge, I wish I would have taken a photo. I'll never do it again, so it's just not going to exist. But there was this huge influx of students at the scorers table. And my scores were fantastic, but bless them, they were just slow. They had to take, 6 or 7 minutes for each kid. And then they would try to communicate as clearly as they could, but there's the pressure of the line and right, all of that was working against them. So while it was effective and while it was important, because students did get to experience some of what end of year testing would feel like, they did get to work through that stamina that they needed to build, right? The squirrely, the struggle, they had all that. There was a big issue with being able for my scores to be able to give feedback quickly, effectively, without these huge lines forming. So I moved on to year two. Year two, I asked Miss Meador, Alicia, my learning coach, I asked her, like, how can we use Writable for the scrimmage? Because I knew that grading pieces on Writable, it was taking me about half the time. It took me about 10 minutes by hand. So on Writable, I was scoring students in 3 to 5 minutes. So if I was faster, I thought maybe my scores would be faster. So we set up the writing scrimmage again in year two, but this time everything was Writable. Their prompt was on Writable. Their texts were loaded onto Writable, and they were going to type on Writable. And my scorers were going to give feedback on Writable using that same checklist that they had used all year long. So I made sure I made sure to send out that checklist to the scorers so they could see what Writable was going to look like, show them a piece so they felt comfortable. And then we did the scrimmage again. And this time, instead of large chunks of our time being students waiting in line and long conversations with scorers, I had either students writing, students speaking directly with the scorer, or students sitting down to revise. Those long lines were eliminated because what I noticed was all scorers had to do was mark students on Writable, have a 2-second conversation because the Writable rubric speaks for itself. It's so black and white, it's so clear. There wasn't a lot of conversation that was needed. And students understood. This is the same rubric they've been using all year. They understood that feedback. They could sit down and make revisions. Another thing is my scores did not have to decide proficiency on the spot. Writable, when you submit your grade, it calculates their grade immediately. So all they had to do was submit their feedback and Writable would determine their grade. And if it wasn't proficiency, students would sit down and revise. And if it was, they were finished. So it went from long lines at the amusement park to fast pass, right? It was so much smoother. I think our writing scrimmage it was almost an hour less time, but way more effective. So, and that's really all I wanted to share. If you're interested in the writing scrimmage, I would recommend skip what I did year one, go to year two. And use that same Writable rubric that you're going to be teaching with all year long. So let me know.
Something else to note is we moved from having all the students in the one designated spot to doing this in classrooms. And so it was their homeroom teacher. They stayed in that classroom. We've moved scores into those classrooms. Those are just some logistical things that shored up that time. Something else that I want to note is when we were talking about how we were going to shift from Google Docs and a paper rubric to Writable, we had lots and lots of questions. And I'm not afraid to ask questions. Anybody that's ever worked with me, like if I want to answer, I'm going to ask a question and I'm going to keep digging until I get that. And I want to show you where to ask questions on Writable because these people are nothing short of amazing in getting me immediate quick responses. And if they are not able to find me an answer or they are not able to give me immediate answer. They're like, I'll push this along to the next person, like the next higher up person, or I'll add this to our list of things that we need to try to look at shoring up if this is going to really impact writing instruction. And I remind them very kindly, this will impact writing instruction. We do need this update. So to do that, Kara's going to show us where to go. When you log into Writable, you're going to go to that question mark. Once you click on that question mark, it's the far right-hand side that says live support. Kara can give us a little bit more information about this. I just think there's like 5 or 6 people. There's not many people. And it's this, I mean, I'm best friends with some of these people because we have talked about every single thing about Plano's writing scrimmage, because I've got to get scores in there and having scores access to this, people who are not connected to Writable or HMH. I've got to make sure that they are able to sync these classrooms, if it's synced from Google Classroom or if it's synced from HH. There's a lot of logistical pieces that Miss Beals does not have time for. I want her delivering writing instruction. So she literally gives me a Google Doc with running questions as they come to her mind. And my job is to talk to my best friends at Writable, and we're going to solve these problems. And that is how you do it. And I promise you, they are on it. It is in real time. You're not waiting for an email response. We all know we can't stand that. Like if I have a question, I need an answer. And so they are nothing short of phenomenal. And I cannot sing their praises enough. And so I wanted to make sure you knew how to get access to that should you go on this adventure. That way, when you have logistical questions, and it doesn't have to be writing scrimmage related. The other day, Miss Beals had a question about a student who moved in and didn't have access to the writing assignment that she'd already assigned all of her other students. I got on there, I asked him my question. He fixed it for me. And then I got off and I thought, well, I might need to know how to fix that. So I thought he was just being really kind. He just did it for me. But then he showed me how we can do it in the future when we have new students, because that's inevitable. We're going to get new students throughout the year. So they are amazing. And I wanted to make sure you knew where to ask those questions.
Well, and thank you for the shout out for our team. I know we're really dedicated to that. And, you know, we come from a background of wanting to make sure that you don't get stuck. We want you to be able to move forward as quick as you can. Teachers' time is so valuable. And by having this live chat capability, you can ask us those questions, and then we're right there to help you. So thanks for sharing that about our team. That's really nice, and we appreciate that. The other thing is, I saw in chat we had one little question. They were looking for, a person was actually looking for, where do we find the scrimmage in Writable, you know, and it's a process that this team has put together, and they're using Writable as that tool that enhances the writing process throughout the year. And then by doing the scrimmage, which is an event at your school, this is what this is all about preparing preparing your students for that test by using this scrimmage, just like you do when you think about any athletic event. I know when I think about football or soccer, so we have scrimmages because we're preparing for that big day. And so that's what this is. This is your process for preparing for that big day. So I just wanted to address that, and we are welcome to, you know, we're happy to help you. We put as much as we can into this document to help you understand how to prepare for it, the scoring package, etc. And then again, questions, we have ways for you to contact us as we've shared. Let's talk a little bit about, and I'm going to go ahead and put my screen back up here. What's next? Because you've done an amazing job talking about years 1 and 2, but now we're moving into year 3, to both Alicia and Katherine, and you've seen some amazing progress. I know you don't have your scores back from the state as at this moment, as the last time we've talked, but so let's talk about what are our goals for year 3. So Katherine, you shared this with me as we were working on like coaching, talking about like, how do I even do more with Writable? How do I even do more with the challenges that I had in year 1? I'm really comfortable with Writable now. What does that look like for me? So let's talk about this goal a minute. And I've got some images up so that we can see what it looks like in Writable.
So one thing that I really love is it's kind of like, I know that when Steve Jobs was creating Apple, he would tell his employees, hey, we need to create something for them they don't even know they need. And so I feel like that's year 3 for me. There's some things here that are coming down the pipe that I don't really fully know how I need it, but Writable is going to support me in it.
Okay, while she's doing that, let me just tell you that these are these images that we're looking at right here are tied to all the rubrics. So everything in Writable is tied to a rubric and a skill. And so then everything that she has been doing throughout this whole year with her students in writing is gathering that data that she wasn't able to gather with all those piles of papers. It's in my opinion, as a previous teacher, it's that what I used to keep in my brain. I know this student needs this and I know this student needs that. But now by looking at the reporting and then even the student groupings, I can actually see what student needs what.
So when I was going through student pieces, I knew that I had students that need differentiation, that needed small group. And so I would go through piece by piece and I would say, well, Susan needs help with her intro, and Johnny needs help with text evidence. And I was hand creating these small groups. And so what Kara has just suggested, well, all of my rubric items have skills and categories attached to them. So they're able to take that data when I'm scoring and they're able to create these small groups for me. So that's something else that I can take off my plate that I've been doing by hand. I know it's good teaching, so I took the time to do it, but I'm ready to have my time back. So I'm ready for Writable to do that for me. They're going to help me make sure that my rubrics are tight and clean, and so that all this data is helpful. And so that's something that's coming down the pipe for me in year 3 of using Writable. So I'm very excited about that. So that's one piece of year 3. There are some other things that I would like to try in year 3. In my classroom, I always tell my students, teachers ask you to read 20 minutes a day to be strong readers. So what do we need to do for writing? Well, we need to write to be strong writers. And I don't have 20 minutes, but I have students spend about 5 minutes or so working in writing journals. And you can see mine on the left. Paper pencil writing journals, just to build some stamina, helps students with idea production. And what I really, really love about Writable is they have these pre-made quick writes. And you can see they made one to match mine for me. You can make them I can always upload my own and make it match in Writable. But I love the idea of using Writable for these quick writes because, again, the checklist that you see at the bottom, but we can just create that in Writable and use that every time, attach that every time. You can see students are drawing an image. Well, if you see that small mountain photo, that students can add images just like they do in their writing journal. And then there's a better collab piece where students can see each other's responses in the writing journal, because right now I don't have time for students to take their writing journal and go share it with multiple people. This is something they could do in their own seats when there's a guest teacher while we're transitioning. So this is something that I'm kind of excited about that I think, again, would streamline, that I'd like to try in year 3.
And it keeps you from carrying all those journals everywhere you go too. As long as you have your computer, you can take a quick look at it and go from there. So again, we took example from her writing, we built it into Writable, and then the students, because they want to do the images, they have the ability to do that too. So we're super excited about talking to you at the end of this year and getting some more feedback from you, Katherine, about how this is working in your classroom. The next thing that we are going to be coaching the team at the elementary school is a little bit about our AI. So at Writable, we have been an innovator in the AI space for a number of years, and with the addition of all of the large learning language models coming out, we have incorporated that into Writable. So I have an image here of a writing that was similar to what Ms. Beals was wanting to use in her classroom. It has what would be just, the simple X check plus, so she can just take a quick look at it. And then it gives them some AI feedback. Now, she can take a look at that feedback. She can decide, do I believe that this feedback represents the writing in the way that I want it represented? She can edit it, and then she can send it to the students. So again, giving back some more of that time to her in giving that feedback. We are really excited about working with her and having her give us some feedback on how that's saving her some time there. Again, we haven't had a chance to dive in yet. We're just at the beginning of the school year, but I'm going to be working with their coaches, and we're going to be supporting them on this. I'm going to move to the next one. This one I think is really exciting for for the model of your classroom. And this is that conferencing writing. So why don't you talk a little bit about what you currently do when you're conferencing, and then we can talk a little bit about how it's going to work in Writable.
Absolutely. So right now I do traditional writing conferences. Either I meet with students one-on-one, or I create those small groups and students meet with me in small groups, whether we're focusing on intro. I usually don't do conferences for whole pieces often, just because we know how much time that takes when you times that by 90 students. So what I'm really excited about is getting a little bit more instructional time back, because when students are working on their piece in revision, they have the opportunity to send me questions and comments in this conferencing. If you see at the bottom, they can type, and that comes directly to me. So what's really cool is if I am out of the building, if there's a guest teacher, if I'm at home sick, but I still want to interact with students, I can be conferencing with them in the moment by chatting back and forth with them. So that's a really cool feature that I'm excited to try, especially when we have those long, quiet writing classes, when it's just a writing day. My students just need quiet time to write, and I can work with them without interrupting, without being distracting, by conferencing with them in that chat. So I'm really excited to try this. I think that's going to be really effective when I'm out of the building for some reason, or when I just need to be quiet and let them write. So I'm really excited to try it this year.
And I'm looking forward to hearing some feedback on that. We are starting to see that this is making a huge difference for students, because it's not just the feedback at the end of the writing, it's in that moment when they are in the moment of writing and you make a comment to them and they can see that they can actually change it in the writing. And then we see that it becomes somewhat of a muscle memory for them. So in the next writing, they carry that feedback over. So that is one of the most important things. We are actually kind of at the end of this part right now. I wanted to stop for a second and see if there's any questions. I know, Katie, you've been keeping up with the chat. We're going to take some questions. We also have, I want to put in we've added a couple things into the slide deck for some videos to help you with the AI. We know that's such a really popular topic. So Writable is definitely an innovator in this space. And I know Tess has put some more comments in there about AI that we can have. You can try Writable for free. So for those of you that don't have Writable, we've got some links in there. You can meet with HMH to talk to them about how you purchase Writable. Well, I believe that we have covered everything. Ladies, you are delightful to work with. This has been a wonderful webinar. Love the way that you've been able to incorporate Writable into your instructional design. The scrimmage, love the scrimmage. And basically, for everybody, just make sure that if you are interested in learning more, use one of these links, or make sure you go to that bit.ly so that you can have all the resources for us. With that, I think we'll just go and have a really great rest of our day and our week.